Selling your home in 2025 is the tale of two different markets. Now, I'm coming to you with this message because I'm going to be sharing my personal experience because I am a seller. I've been in the process of selling a home in 2025, so I'm sharing this from my personal experience, and I'm also going to share from the standpoint of clients, right? Because it is the tale of two different markets. And depending on where you are in the US, you are either in a very strong seller's market or a buyer's market. There's not many markets that I've seen, not that there isn't, of course, there always is, but there's not many markets that I've seen that are really in the middle. Not many. I mean, the only market that I can think of for me personally, again, I know there's places that are more of a neutral market, would be the city of Philadelphia, right? And I'm located in the suburbs. The city has a little bit more month supply of inventory, but selling your home in 2025, it's either great or it sucks. It's kind of like there's very little gray area there. There's very little room for it to be, it's not bad, or yeah, this was easy. Yeah, I was able to sell super quick. I got multiple offers, or it's just sitting on the market for 60 days, 90 days, 120 days. It's the tale of two different markets. And this message that I want to share with you today is very poignant and very on par and on topic with what it's like to actually be a home seller in 2025, right? And I'm glad that I'm going through this and I'm able to share my personal experience with you. And I will have to say, and I'll lay out everything along the way. The house I'm selling is a vacation property, right? It's a second home, an Airbnb. So those types of markets, vacation markets, second home markets, are different than areas where people live full time. Okay. Now it's pretty crazy how different they are. Now, where I live, the suburbs of Philadelphia, it's just much different than it is up in the Pocono Mountains in Pennsylvania. It's significantly different. There's a lot that goes into it. There's a lot of different nuance that goes into it. The suburbs of Philadelphia are in a very strong seller's market still, almost every area. I can't really think of an area that's not in demand. Even the school districts that might not be as desirable as others in the four counties that surround Philly, they're still selling pretty fast. Of course, you're always going to have those one-off properties where they're on the market for a long time. And again, there's a lot of different nuance to that. A lot of times it has to do with the agent and not necessarily the house. But as it stands now, I just want to share my experience with selling a property and actually being a seller and going through this process, right? Because there's a lot of agents out there who have not gone through the process of buying or selling a home. It's just the reality of it, and I went through the actual process of selling a home for the first time last summer. It doesn't mean that agents are not qualified to help people sell a home if they haven't sold a home themselves. They just don't have that direct experience, okay? For me, fortunately, I had that actual experience as of last year, and this is the second house I'm selling, and both of them are in the same neighborhood. So it was different selling the house last year than it is selling it this year. And actually, no, I believe it was 2023. Yeah, 2023. Not summer of 2024, it's the summer of 2023. So it was different. It was different than it is now. So that just goes to show you that the market can change quickly. I mean, we're talking about a year and a half. So very different. Anyway, you get a different and more unique experience when it comes to real estate when you actually go through it, right? So when you actually go through the process of selling, go through the process of buying. I got licensed in 2016 and didn't buy my first house until 2018, right? So I went through that process then and I figured out, okay, well, this is what it's like to actually be a home buyer. And that just gives you more experience, more empathy towards people for the process, more patience for the process, right? And the same thing with selling. And again, there's a lot of agents out there that have actually never sold a property themselves. They've never actually been a seller. And to go through that experience a year and a half ago and get that property sold was eye-opening, right? Because a lot of times I go through this through the lens of my client. I try to understand to the best I can what they're going through, the stress they're going through, the struggles they're going through, the challenges that they're going through. And it's kind of hard to do that if you actually haven't done it yourself. So having gone through that process, I knew what to expect coming this time around. So in the Poconos, it's very different than it is in most markets in the US because it is a vacation market. So the Poconos blew up in 2020. It became one of the hottest places to buy a house, to invest in short-term rentals in the US. It blew up. And the reason why it became such a hot spot is because it's very close to New York, very close to Jersey, and in Pennsylvania, and very close to Philly, right? So many, 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 many investors first flock to the area just to get out of their house, right? COVID was going on, lockdowns, all that crap. So people flocked to the Poconos. They wanted to get out of the mountains, or they wanted to get out of the city and get up into the mountains. So they started buying. And it blew up, right? The market absolutely blew up. So now, we're at a period where we're selling at the top of the market, in my opinion. There might be people that try and say, oh no, there's still room for significant growth. I don't see it. I don't see it at all. I actually think that we kind of missed the top of the market, and it's coming not down significantly, but it is coming down a bit. So again, I sold towards the end of 2023, and now I'm selling in 2025. And the experience is very different. And what's interesting is I sold a house in that neighborhood before I listed my home. And it was at a really, in my opinion, a really affordable price for that area. And I ended up selling for $265,000, which that's what a lot of homes were selling for in 2021, right? 2022, before they shot up. So the fact that I was able to sell this property and got an offer pretty much right away, sold it for a little bit over asking price, was able to work out, like negotiate on the seller's behalf for them to pay a little bit less in commission than they would have normally if the whole NAR lawsuit didn't happen. It was great, right? It was a good experience, and I sold it very quick. And a lot of properties were sitting on the market for a long time. A lot of properties were sitting on the market for a long time, and they still are. Like there's properties that are on the market now after I sold that one towards the end of 2024. Like there's still properties that are on. That goes to show you that it is a big buyer's market up there currently. There's a lot more inventory, not a ton of inventory, but there's a lot more inventory, is available. And there's not that much buyer demand out there right now. It's just not the same as it was, halfway through 2020, all through 2021, 22, and 23, even in 2024. There's not that much demand. So that market is more of a buyer's market. Now, I guess I'll say that I was a little bit spoiled because I was able to sell that property quickly. We were able to close pretty quickly while everyone else was sitting on the market. And I was like, okay, well, I'm a professional. I'm skilled at what I do. I was like, okay. In the back of my head, I was thinking probably a lot of that had to do with the price point, because the price point that I'm selling my property at is 2 times as much almost, right? And again, the buyer pool just isn't as big as it was before. Even in those lower price points, people are looking in the lower price points. No one's really thinking right now like they were before that, oh, I want to buy a $600,000, vacation home at a 7% interest rate, right? Because even if you put 20% down, the financing for that is still really high. So I went into it. I decided after I sold this property in the neighborhood that I wanted to go back, or not go back, that I wanted to sell my property. You know, it was something that my wife and I talked about. We just have been wanting to get out of the market and put that money elsewhere. And I thought to myself, okay, I was able to sell this other one pretty quickly. I'll probably be able to do the same, you know, because the house that my property was or is about 800 square feet bigger, give or take. We're selling it fully furnished with newer furnishings, newer furniture, and the property hasn't closed yet, so I'm not going to get into any specifics because it's not settled until it's settled. It's under contract, but it's not settled until it's settled. So I got to share specifics, but listed it, I believe, around the beginning of January. And, you know, real estate is pretty cyclical. In the winter, there aren't as many people looking to buy generally as there are in the spring and summer or the fall. But the Poconos, again, it's a vacation destination. People do live there full time. There are schools up there. There's jobs up there, not a lot of opportunity and not that many schools, but there's schools in every single area, right? So people do live there full time. Now, the issue is the people that do live there full time that end up staying there, maybe they go to school there and they end up staying there and want to buy there, they have been priced out, right? Because like my home, when it was sold, when I bought it, the guy I bought it from, I believe he bought it for, I don't know, I'm going to say like 110,000, 120, like dirt cheap, right? Sold it to me for 350. And then we ended up, you know, based off comps and based off what it offered and what we were leaving behind, decided to list it at 430,000. Now, I believe that if we decided to do this in early 2024, we probably would have got close to that, you know, because there wasn't as much inventory as there is now. So we listed it at 430 beginning of the year, beginning of 2025, and slow, like really, really slow. And I'm not used to that, you know, because when I list and sell homes, even in this area, right, in greater Philadelphia, you get 20, 30, 40 showings right away, generally multiple offers still. Like even with interest rates being high, you're still, for the most part, you know, there's always outliers out there that don't get that. But for the most part, I'm used to selling everything pretty fast. Like I've always pretty much sold the properties that I listed pretty fast. Even in the Poconos, right? The properties that I listed in the Poconos, like the one I sold in the neighborhood and then a few others before, like I sold them pretty quickly. So I wasn't used to homes sitting on the market for that long. And not only that, we weren't really even getting showings, which was crazy. Like we weren't even getting the amount of showings that I was hoping for, that I was expecting. You know, I did everything right. I did everything like I do for every property. Great photos, video, everything, right? Listing description, posting all over Facebook. Now, I will say that it is very different, and I shared this on a previous live stream before. It is very different to sell a vacation property, an Airbnb property, than it is just selling like this house that I'm in now, right? If I listed and sold this house that I'm in now, I would have a much different experience, much better experience, so like significantly better, because I know it would get multiple offers and I know that it would sell pretty quickly, and I would, as a seller, be in the driver's seat. But when you're selling a short-term rental, it's very different. It's very different because people look at it as an investment and they look at it as a business, right? And I've come to the realization that selling an Airbnb is more than investing in real estate. Like when someone buys an Airbnb, it's very different, right? It's more like you're buying a business, rather you are buying a property. The property is the business, but people treat it differently. And I did think about that when we were listing it. That was not in the back of my mind. It was in the forefront of my mind. I knew that it was going to be a different experience selling this property than it would be selling a property in an area where people live full time. You know, 98% of the people in the area live full time. So it was much slower, right? It was much, much, much slower. We weren't getting the showings. They were trickling in. Everybody's asking for the numbers. What's P&L? And I had all the numbers, right? I had everything because I track everything like you should. And it was just a way different experience, right? Compared to the property that I sold earlier or towards the end of 2024. I mean, that one we had a bunch of showings. We actually got the first offer was the offer we accepted. The first and only offer we got was the offer we accepted and ended up selling for over asking. But we got an offer within days of having the property listed. So this is the same neighborhood. I'm literally talking about the same area, the same community. And even the other properties that I listed and sold up there with a bunch of showings, multiple offers, and it was different. And then the property that I sold personally in the summer of 2023, I'm so confused right now. Actually, it might have been 2024. It might have been July. I mean, when it settled in July of 2024. But we were able to, I didn't even have to list that on the MLS. I was able to sell it to someone who was renting it for he was in there for months. He was renting it for like 3 or 4 months. And we were thinking about selling it. We were able to just sell it to him, which, things like that don't always happen, but they do sometimes. But it was much different and it was much easier. And I was expecting that when I listed our property now, but it took long. It took long, and the showings, they did not come like I thought they were going to. And people kept asking, keep following up. Oh, this looks interesting. I would get people that would say, oh, would you be willing to accept this? Would you be willing to accept that? So no legitimate offers. Eventually, down the road, I did get multiple offers, which is interesting because here, in greater Philadelphia, you get multiple offers pretty quickly, right? And you set an offer deadline, say, hey, look, this is our deadline. Seller says to submit your highest and best by this time. You go back and forth between all the offers and see which one's best. This happened, the multiple offer situation happened for me pretty much at the same time. Hey, submit your highest and best. But it happened like 4 months, right? 4 months after we listed it, which I was not used to. I'm just not used to that. So again, it's like that tale of two different markets, right? Because you could be selling a property in an area like the Poconos or like the Smoky Mountains or like, I don't know, Big Bend or Montana, right? These vacation destinations, they're not going to sell as quickly for the most part as these areas that are more populated and where people live long term. So, eventually we got an offer that we accepted for the property in the Poconos and now have been working towards getting all that figured out. And, it's interesting to be a seller right now. It's very interesting because every single situation is different and every single area is different. Every single area is different. There's no blanket statement that I can make to say what it's like to sell a property right now overall, except for it's either easy or hard. It's either easy or hard. There's really not much middle ground. And if you're selling your property or you're considering selling your property, you have to really dig into the market that you're in. I say this all the time. There's places like Florida and there's places in Texas where it's just a buyer's market. It's a buyer's market, and there's a lot of inventory right now in certain areas. Like there's a lot of inventory. In my area, there's 2 months supply of inventory. There's places in Florida that's 6 months, 7 months, 8 months. And there's places in Florida that probably have less, like 2 months or 3 months. Same thing with Texas. There's always areas, there's always pockets that are different than each other. So it's hard for me to say one blanket statement about everything. But when you're focused on selling right now, the most important thing you can do is hone in on what kind of market that you're in. So if I listed and sold this house that I'm in right now, I know I'm in a strong seller's market. I know I'm in a market where there is very, very little inventory, very little. And I know that I'm in a market where this house would sell for significantly more than I paid for it. And we've updated it over the years. We took great care of it, and it would sell fast. And we would get multiple offers, and it would most likely sell for over asking, depending on where I price it at. I can try and be super greedy and price it at a ridiculous number that nobody would pay for, and my house is going to sit on the market. Even in a strong seller's market where there's not a lot of inventory, it doesn't mean that you can price it way crazy high. If you're in a market like mine where I'm at in 2 months worth or 2 months supply of inventory, and you look at the past sales and you're saying, okay, well, this one sold for 500, this one sold for 490. I know that there's not much inventory, so I'm going to price mine at 575, like based off of nothing but the fact that there's no inventory and somebody's going to pay for it. That's not necessarily true. And that's not very true overall. I have priced properties where the clients wanted to get significantly more than I thought it was going to be worth. And look, I'm not at the end of the day, it's your house. I provide you with the information. I provide you with the data. I provide you with the starting price that we should list at. That is going to be the best starting listing price, in my opinion, my professional opinion, to get the most interest from buyers. And if you want to price it $50,000 over that, or $75,000 or $100,000 over that, you have to understand that your property is going to sit for much longer than it should. Very rarely, very, very rarely. Like, I don't have any personal experience with listing that high over the comps where it actually sells for that amount. So you have to really, really, really hone in on the market that you're located in right now in 2025 when you're thinking about selling, because that's going to help you decide where you're going to start that listing price, right? Because the starting listing price is more like a marketing tactic, because there's some areas where you're going to list it at that price and it's going to sell for way over asking. And there's some areas where it's like, okay, for my community in the Poconos, based on what we have, what the property offers, what the property has, that we're leaving pretty much all the furnishings behind. Just installed a hot tub. It has an extra, all this other stuff. I was thinking, okay, this seems like a good logical starting point to list the home at $430,000. And then sell at that price. We had to reduce the price, and we ended up accepting an offer eventually. But here's the deal. When you're thinking about and you're really strongly considering selling right now, the number one thing that you have to think about is the kind of market that you're in. Once you do that, then you can determine the plan moving forward, And look, there's no magic sauce to selling a home. There's no secret thing that realtors do to sell properties that's not already available to you. Like, you can list and sell your home for sale by owner and have close or the same success as an agent would. You just have to know what you're doing. And that's like one of the biggest issues with selling for sale by owners, taking on the experience, knowledge, and expertise as an agent. And I always liken it to hiring someone to do your taxes. When I was younger and I didn't really have that much going on, I just had a normal W-2 job, I would use TurboTax every year to do my taxes. And I would get a refund. And to me, that was a success. I got my refund. I did it myself. I paid way less than what I would pay a CPA to do it. And then eventually, as you start getting more things, it becomes a little bit more complicated, right? And selling a house right now is a little bit more complicated. Doesn't mean that you can't do it. But what I found out is when I started hiring a CPA to do my taxes, that's when I really, and this was a point where I wasn't getting returns back because I'm self-employed. I always got to pay, but I was paying significantly less, right? But if I did my own taxes as a self-employed person, I would be paying way significantly more than I would if I didn't hire a professional to do it. And that's generally what happens when it comes to selling your house. So if you're doing it for sale by owner, generally there's somewhere along the process that you may just not know. You don't really know about marketing. You don't know about vetting buyers. You don't know about handling showings or, how to properly get your home out there to the mass amount of people. You're probably not good at negotiating unless you're in a sales position already. You're probably not good at keeping everything together because you have a family and you have careers and you have kids and all this stuff, right? That's why it's so smart to hire a professional, because that gives you that separation. Yes, you're going to pay them. And yes, it might seem like a lot of money, but at the end of the day, if they hold their weight in value for selling your property at a great price, probably where you wouldn't have sold it, then they make up for the money you had to pay out. And a lot of people, they might confuse that and say, well, I could have sold it for $550,000 too, and now I'm paying the agent blah, blah, blah percent. Could you though? Like, do you really think you could have done that? Like, do you think you could have positioned it the way that the agent did? You could have. I'm not saying that you can't, but it's the same thing with taxes. You can do TurboTaxes, do them yourself. You can hire a CPA and make more money. It's always, again, it's not always cut and dry like that, but most of the time, that is how it works. Most of the time, that's how it works. So once you figure out what kind of real estate market you're in, that's going to help you set up the plan, And I knew that going into it. I knew going into the market was not nearly as strong as what it was like before. I knew that going into it. And I probably could have positioned it better, to be honest. I could have positioned it better and listed it lower to attract more buyers. But here's the thing. The demand up there is not that strong. And that's why I chose to list it where I listed it at, because the demand is not that strong. If I thought the demand was higher, then I probably would have listed it a little bit lower. But the demand wasn't there, and I knew that. I knew it was more of a buyer's market. So in a buyer's market, in order to stand out, one of the main things you can do is stand out with pricing, with listing it lower. But that's not the route that I chose. Hindsight's 2020. Going back, I think, okay, yeah, maybe I should have listed it a little bit lower. Would that have attracted more people? Maybe, maybe not. Honestly, who knows? It could have not. It could have been the same process, right? It could have taken the same amount of time to get the offer we wanted. And I could have listed it way lower and thought to myself, okay, it's going to get bid up. And then it couldn't have got bid up. There's always a lot of different nuances to it, a lot of different scenarios, a lot of different situations, but you have to understand the kind of market you're in. You have to understand what what buyer demand is in your area. If you have high buyer demand, then most likely overall in the US, if you have high buyer demand, there's a good chance that the inventory is pretty low. When the inventory is high in your area, there's a good chance that the buyer demand is not as strong as you would hope for when you're selling your home. So there's a lot of different trade-offs. There's a lot of different things that go into it. So what it's like selling a home in 2025, for me, I would say it didn't suck, but it's not what I hoped for. It's not what I expected, or it kind of is what I expected. I just wish it didn't go that way. But look, it's different for me. It's going to be different for you. You have to really just really dive into whether you do it yourself or you hire an agent, what kind of market you're actually in. Seller's market, neutral market, buyer's market. Not many are neutral. There's still most of the US is still in a very strong seller's market. And then there's a lot of portions that are in a strong buyer's market. Maybe not a lot, but there's a lot of pockets, I would say. And it doesn't make up the entire US, but it makes up a small portion. And you just have to understand what kind of real estate market you're in order to sell successfully, and then follow all of the other rules, right? And I have a ton of videos about that, how, the exact process of how to list and where to start, and photos, videos, marketing, all that stuff. So needless to say, that is the process, what it's like to sell in 2025. You could have a completely different experience, and you could have sold your house in two hours with 65 offers, right? But it just depends on where your house is located. So If you need an agent referral anywhere in the US or in Canada, I have a network now of 26,000 agents. I'm part of a real estate brokerage, 26,000 agents all over the US and Canada, and we can help. So just click that link in the description if you need an agent referral. If you're in the greater Philly area and you want to work with me, just click that link in the description, schedule an appointment. Look forward to speaking with you guys soon. Have a great day.